Hey, everybody, Patrick Connor here, and welcome to the Knuckles and Gloves podcast. We're doing a little bit of retro action, a little bit of Manny Pacquiao, Juan Manuel Marquez. I'm here with my boy, Brin-Jonathan Butler. Yeah, Brin, how you doing, man? It's been a couple minutes.
It has. It has. Well, this is interesting series of fights to go back to, four of them. So I'm into it, especially after, Saturday night waiting fucking 5 hours to watch Tyson Fury embarrass the sport of boxing like few have ever. Yeah.
Yeah, that was, I would say, somewhat embarrassing, needless to say, at least for him. I don't know if he necessarily embarrassed boxing, but he at least embarrassed himself. At least. But we won't take 5 hours to do the show. We're going to fly through four fights, but rewatching these fights, rewatching the fights between Manny Pacquiao and Juan Manuel Marquez, I have to say, I mean, I don't know if I went in with a bias. I don't know if I went in looking for something. Not really much changed on my cards. I still felt pretty much the same way as I felt when I watched them previously and scored them or whatever. But I did not mind rewatching them. Entertaining set of fights, especially fights 2 and 4, in my opinion. But I mean, the way that these fighters match up, they talk about fighters from history, Willie Pep, Sandy Sadler, Graziano Zale, who, pair them. You know what I'm saying? Today's the anniversary of Ali Foreman, Ali and several other fighters just matched well to make good fights or entertaining fights, interesting fights. That's Manny Pacquiao and Juan Manuel Marquez.
Yeah, they're really interesting individually, but to go back and go through them all the way through in a linear fashion of, I didn't count up how many rounds altogether, but what, I mean, 36 and then six, so 40, 42. It is just interesting to see the little variance in how both of them change a bit. The bodies change a little bit. I mean, famously in the fourth, Pacquiao too in the second and third.
Mm-hmm.
That body, you can see its impact on how he's fighting, and knowing he's got different things that he's working with and how the confidence impacts both guys. And in that fourth fight as well, I mean, the fourth one is just a magical fight because there's so many back and forths in it, and revelations for both guys in real time, because it's sort of like, okay, your body looks like this, Juan Ma, but how is this going to impact you? Is it going to slow you down? And then, really it's two shots that Pacquiao didn't see made
Yeah,
the
the
entire
fuse
difference.
starts ticking.
Yeah, and yet it's the best version of Pacquiao that ever fought him by far. And also, as Marquez is dealing with the best Pacquiao he's ever seen, he is willing to take risks that he was never willing to take in the first three fights. So it's fun to holistically kind of look at this, the legacy of it, and just think, like, if a referee very reasonably in the first round of the first fight had said, you've been knocked down three times, it's a 10-6 round, let's just stop it here, we wouldn't have any of this. And that
Yeah,
would be a completely reasonable thing for a referee. Nobody would have bitched about it had that happened. Any of Marquez diehard fans would be like, well, he was knocked down three times in the first round and looked completely overwhelmed and outgunned. How could you think there would be anything left for this to go anywhere? Well, that's what we're looking at now is 10 years worth of fights between these two guys, and they're all dramatically different to score and assess, like, the variables.
yeah, it's pretty amazing, dude. Because as many people know, Manny Pacquiao, at least to most American fight fans, showed up pretty much out of nowhere. He showed up first on a Mike Tyson undercard, which was, I think enough of an introduction, but he wasn't facing anybody that US fans were particularly familiar with. So needless to say, it was him overwhelming Marco Antonio Barrera that was the coming out party. That was when people, myself included, went,
Me too.
what the fuck just happened here, bro?
Me too.
He was completely overwhelmed, and Manny Pacquiao literally just burst onto the scene. And so a lot of people also forget, though, on Marquez's side, he had been around since the 1990s. He wasn't somebody who just showed up out of nowhere. It's just that he had had some ups and downs in his career prior to that early 2000s, mid 2000s run. and he had been around in the 1990s. You know, he actually had some pretty glaring weaknesses in that early form of himself. Hadn't really matured as a fighter. Fought, for instance, Freddie Norwood, dreadful fight. Even throughout his career, he did not match up super great against fellow counterpunchers, and that was the case against Freddie Norwood. Terrible fight. But then after that, he actually went on a really solid run. He beat Robbie Peden in a fight where he beat the absolute shit out of Robbie Peden, hit him with so many body shots that Robbie Peden puked blood in the corner. You know, they had to stop the fight because he's sitting there puking blood. There's actually, side note, little asterisk, in most commissions, if a fighter vomits in the corner, that's an automatic stoppage. But you didn't know that. Mantecas Medina, who was usually good for a distance fight, Marquez broke him down and stopped him. And then Derek Gainer, who he famously like ran out of the ring. Derek Gainer had been featured on a ton of Roy Jones undercards and pay-per-views, and everybody hated him. He was super awful to watch every single time, but he'd get stoppages sometimes. And it was terrible because Derek Gainer literally like sprinted from Marquez, and Marquez just like damn near chased him out of the ring. So everybody was like, yay, you know, bye, get out of here. And that was kind of where we were when the first Pacquiao fight happened. Everyone was rooting for Marquez because he got rid of these guys, kind of cleaned out a little portion of the division. But Manny Pacquiao, who the fuck is this guy? You know, where did he come from? So this clash was something that a lot of hardcore fans knew about, but it definitely was not. It was not mainstream. Neither fighter was a mainstream fighter at this point when the first fight happened. So that's part of what I think makes this first fight a little bit more magical, because it's got a little bit more of like a hardcore tinge to it, you know?
It's a great point, because on paper, if you looked at Pacquiao going into Barrera, Americans didn't know him, and they didn't know the Philippines. You know, they didn't know all that he was going to bring to the sport to revolutionize boxing and transcend the sport.
Here we are 20 years later, bro. And like, can you fucking imagine everything that's happened? Sorry to interrupt you, but oh my God.
No, it's just true. And the Jimmy Kimmel stuff, like, he is such an unbelievable, lovable character. And I mean, even going into this Marquez fight, I mean, my first note is look at his face going into it. You're like, who is this guy? This isn't boxing. This is not solemn. This is not all the dark adages that we hear about what needs to forge a boxing. Well, Pacquiao had all that. He probably had it worse than any of the American horror stories that forged our fighters. He's selling donuts on the street. The family dog is eaten when they run out of all money, sort of thing. And yet he is so joyous and life affirming as he's coming out. The pride of his country is just coming out with this huge smile. You're like, he's going to get killed. You're not allowed to fight this way, right? You need to be Mike Tyson going into Spinks, the chains we're hearing rattling of the soundtrack, and everybody's saying this is the ultimate sort of entrance. Well, Pacquiao's the opposite. Pacquiao is like a karaoke with all your friends, just having, you know, the best times of just nothing to worry about. That's how he looks when he's going out to the ring. And yet, I mean, as you mentioned with Barrera, he went into that a pretty serious underdog. This is a guy who was knocked out from people nobody had ever heard of back in the Philippines. He started super young, and it's like, well, you're already 25 years old coming into the Marquez fight. Like, we should know really who you are. You should be established by now. Little did we know where this guy is going to go and have one of the great runs in the history of the sport. And going into this, I think people, I mean, my barber was a person who lived in my basement who is of Filipino descent from Manila. He was telling me about Pacquiao before Barrera, and I was like, yeah, okay, I get that you're proud of your countryman who's a fighter. And then I saw Barrera, and I was like, I haven't witnessed anything like this, where I didn't know who you were, and now I have to. You see it in, you know, Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman goes from I've never heard of this person to the biggest star in the world within 20 seconds. That's the effect Pacquiao had on boxing, was what Julia Roberts was to Hollywood. Pacquiao was after Barrera. This just cannot be happening. Barrera is a Hall of Famer who is this good. So after that, for him to take on Marquez, coming into this, I mean, they're 125 pounds. We also have to remember that we really didn't care as Americans, particularly about this weight class, particularly. This was a really hard sell to get anybody to give a shit about. So him coming in with this sort of enthusiasm, which is a through line throughout his career, this is a really very contrary figure to what we've been conditioned to think boxers need to be really good. It's the closest thing I think we have is sort of Ali in certain moments where there's a joy behind what he brings to the fight. A lot of dark stuff too, obviously, with him attacking his opponents, but there was a huge joy factor. That was the greatest smile in the world. I mean, I think as somebody wrote, there was a sniper who was going to kill him and saw him smiling and couldn't do it. Whether it's true or not, we can all kind of believe, even somebody who had in their heart to kill Ali, that smile just could change anybody's mind about him. So Pacquiao has that similar quality. And going into this, I mean, I wasn't sure that their styles would kind of mix in a way that would be that compelling. And right away from the first second, you're going to see what is the entire series of fights. It's so close. It is just so close what the speed and athleticism and style of Pacquiao is to the intelligence, poise, technique, timing, and willpower of Marquez is. This clash is something that they're just, it's its own version of attrition in just stylistic attrition. So yeah, to get started, knowing where it's going to end was a really weird experience with this first round. So what did you see just going quickly through this?
Well, I noticed that both number one, this is something that I'm going to point out that you might not have noticed or might not have consciously thought of, but now that I'm saying it, it's one of those things that you're going to notice all the time and go, ah, shit. Both Marquez and Barrera have this tendency, and they're not the only ones, but them specifically, they have this tendency when they're fighting, and especially when they're fighting at a distance, to do this hopping when they reset. So they do this type of thing when they reset. And Manny Pacquiao kept catching them both when they were doing that shit, number one. Mm-hmm. But from the outset, both of them kept trying to time Pacquiao's left hand. As natural counterpunchers, they're waiting for the left hand. And both of them made the mistake of thinking, it was coming kind of orthodox for a southpaw, in the usual southpaw way. And it didn't. Pacquiao's super fast, and he throws it in a way that is not like the normal southpaw. The normal southpaw is not throwing that shit like a fastball. And Pacquiao is, but he's throwing it really accurate, and it goes a lot farther than either of them were expecting. So Marquez got nailed with a couple left hands even early and kept trying to counter. But then the second he got nailed with that left hand that put him down the first time, it was like, I think that even though he obviously had the realization like, oh shit, that was a lot faster than I thought. Like he still was trying to adjust when he got up, and Pacquiao gave him no time.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to figure out a way to describe that left hand of Pacquiao's because it's unusual, and he's so one-dimensional also at the first two fights, especially
at the first fight especially, yeah.
You just go, Jesus, the guy who was fighting, I mean, all of these super famous fights he's going to go on to have against De La Hoya, Hatton, where that hook comes into play. Once he has an actual, more than a jab, but a weapon up front, I mean, he's so difficult to deal with. I mean, you see it in the fourth fight, but early on, I mean, he looks like a quarterback trying to throw a 50-yard pass with that straight left. He kind of runs in and just is chucking it over, and he's so quick. I mean, his feet are so quick, and the fire of it.
He closes distance so fast.
Incredibly. And you can see it, like if you've ever been around him sparring or watch him sparring, it's something to see how quick that guy is. I mean, not just the hand speed, which is blinding, but the feet, the distance closing. So it takes a lot for guys to really measure that when you're actually in with it, as opposed to watching it. Very, very different proposition. So yeah, I mean, I had Marquez beginning very tense and very serious, and Pacquiao looks quite awkward. His balance is not great early on. You're going to see him really gain a lot of balance as he gains weight through the successive fights. The weight and how it impacts his anatomy really is contributing to him being a much more stable fighter, both offensively, creating feints, head movement, but also after he's throwing punches, he's not as wildly off balance as he is in this first one. But off the bat, you're right. I mean, he catches Marquez with these shots, because Marquez has just never dealt with anybody with this kind of speed and the ability to close the distance. And the rhythm is just totally off for Marquez. He can't time him. He doesn't have enough athleticism to implement the technique and the strategy yet. He hasn't made that adjustment, which he will make, profoundly so, which is what makes this first one so interesting. But it's staggering to see, by the third knockdown, Marquez is hurt. I mean, there's a point where he puts his hands on his head, looks like he's in a soap opera, just kind of crying.
For a moment, it looked like he was gonna just give up.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I'm not that he was crying, but I just mean it looked like the gesture of how you just collapse in tears. It was just that he was so stunned by what was happening. So we're like, oh, it's Barrera again, except it's more emphatic, and manages to get up slowly, up at 8. And Pacquiao, it's just a 10-6 round. I was trying to think, when have I seen a 10-6 round? I can't even remember, really. So you just
they don't they don't generally get to that point, because usually if it's going to be a 10, like usually that fight gets stopped. Usually these days, you read about fights from like 1931 where there's like 19 knockdowns in one round, and you're like, holy shit, how did that happen? But like that doesn't happen now. That's never going to happen now. But that's why you don't see those rounds.
Yeah, I totally agree. And if I was a referee, I would have stopped it after 3. With what was happening in the last half of that round, it's a miracle that the referee wasn't like, what's the point of doing this? This is just abuse. I mean, think of how many stoppages we've seen in the last 5 years where it's just, I mean, even Wilder getting stopped against Fury sort of thing in the second fight. So, I mean, second round, Pac is stalking. I mean, he's firmly convinced it's going to be a Barrera situation again, and he is landing, but Marquez is alert, and he is beginning to make adjustments, and he is beginning to time him much more effectively. And then his nose starts gushing. So he's like, it's over again. There's no way he's going to recover, because if it's coming out his nose, he's swallowing a lot of blood. This is a bad
from that
situation.
point on, his mouth is, the whole fight, he has his mouth wide open.
Yeah. And I mean, even going into the third, Marquez is starting to counter more effectively, especially to the body. End of the round, he's landing some big shots on Pacquiao, and the flow begins to change right away. And you're just thinking, no, this has to go back to what Pacquiao did in the first round, and it never is, which is a weird feeling. Like, again, some of these great fights that we've gone back to look at, there's a feeling of inevitability, and yet there's surprise at the same time when you're watching some of these things. Because like Pacquiao, that guy has to come back, and he just doesn't. And yet you start moving into fandom with Marquez, because like, how did this guy have the balls? And
it doesn't even look like the same fight,
No, it doesn't. It becomes a completely different fight. So it's almost like the first round was the first fight, and this is the rematch where you go, oh, Marquez, what a brilliant thing. But it's within the same fight. So yeah, I mean, even the fourth round, suddenly Marquez is not just rebounding, he is dominating. It is his pace. He has complete control. The output is slowed dramatically with both fighters. And you're going, does Pacquiao have a plan B? Because the plan A is not going to work anymore. Marquez has solved that. So does he have any other questions he can ask Marquez? And it doesn't look like Pacquiao does. Pacquiao seems very one-dimensional going into the fifth, and Marquez just gets more poised. The pace slows even more. And there's some really good exchanges by the fifth round. There's some bombs that both guys are throwing, and Marquez reverts back to sort of countering in a way that's taking some more risk. But I mean, how did you see by the fifth?
So basically the way that I scored the first fight was that Manny Pacquiao obviously got a 10-6 round. And I'm happy you mentioned inevitability, because we're talking about the inevitability of progress versus the surprise of Larry Merchant dropping the occasional racist bomb, like Manny Pacquiao is coming at Marquez like a typhoon across the Pacific.
Yeah, that gets the Bob Sheridan Award for, I would love to say the N-word in private as I do, but in public, this political correctness. Yeah.
That's the, which is second to the that's how just things were back then award. So
Yeah,
that's good gravy, Larry. I
yeah.
mean,
Bob Sheridan
we don't have
Meritorious
better.
Award of Conduct.
We don't have better. Come on. But regardless, I saw obviously 10-6 round in the first round for Manny. I gave him the second round, but I thought the second round was close because Marquez actually rebounded really well for a guy who got knocked down 3 times. But I started kind of thinking, am I just scoring this because he did better? I'm not sure if he won the second, but through 6 rounds, I gave Marquez rounds 3, 4, 5, and 6. So Manny Pacquiao got the first 2, Marquez gets the next 4, and it's starting to look like look, I noted in almost all of these rounds apart from the first that Pacquiao's not fighting with a lot of urgency. He's not really fighting like a guy who knocked down his opponent, like he might have broken his nose a few rounds ago and really hurt him. He starts boxing with him, the pace slows, and it's almost as if Manny believes he can win this kind of fight with Marquez, and straight up, he can't. He didn't.
Yeah,
Not those rounds,
it's
anyway.
yeah, and I see that point, but I found that I was in all 4 of these fights, and I'm not usually aligned terribly closely with Harold Letterman, but I really was with these 4 fights because I do feel like you have to give Pacquiao the credit with meaningful aggression because it's just harder to fight that way than what Marquez is doing, which doesn't mean I don't respect the Marquez position of countering, letting the aggressor come in. But if you're getting outlanded and outthrown consistently, and the only action is a result of Pacquiao's aggression, when those rounds were close, I just had to give it to Pacquiao. So I think I agree with you. 10-6 in the first one. And I don't know how you could not score that 10-6 because that does become an issue where one judge scored a 10-7. Wasn't that right?
That actually became a big post-fight talking point. I remember Doug Fisher having to field a number of questions about that because one judge scored at 10-7 and that made the difference in the draw. But a lot of people were arguing, well, kind of like how we were talking, if you're going to score at 10-6, then the fight should just be stopped. And as we saw, that was not the case. So
Oh, it was abundantly clear it was a 10-9 round, and then there were 3 knockdowns. So I just basic arithmetic. Second round, I gave it to Pac just for aggressiveness and it also resulting into the blood gushing and stuff like that. I think that impacts judges and myself also. Third round, really clear Marquez. Fourth round, Marquez. Fifth round, I thought it was really close, but I gave a slight edge to Pacquiao. Sixth round, Marquez just lands like a catapult of a right hand.
I thought
And
that was nearly a 10-8 round for Marquez. Like he beat the crap out of Pacquiao for the last minute.
yeah. No, I agree. And just that Marquez is so careful with his application of aggression. He's just not careless. And I think also just the way he's controlling the crowd, like the crowd is so into this fight with what the style is between these two guys, adds something to this fight that's unusual. Cotto used to have that all the time. Trinidad more than almost anybody, but the crowd is an element in this fight. I think with the judging, just because it's hard to appreciate it. I think not that I was there, but I mean, you have even the announcers kind of basking in a really unusual atmosphere of intensity between these two guys. So I wonder how much that impacted the two judges. But by the 6th round, I mean, amazingly, Marquez is back on my scorecard within a point. He won the 6th round. I had it, but I mean, I have it 56-55 by the midway point. You're just kind of like, how did a guy come back from a 10-6 round? It's such a hill to climb. And in the 7th, he wins another one. He's just too dynamic for Pacquiao. And Pacquiao clearly just does not have another plan. And Roach is not even advising him to really do anything.
It's
Pacquiao
like
just
they haven't even gotten to that point in training yet. You know what
no,
I mean? Like they probably hadn't even gotten there yet.
no, it's exactly like there's some. I remember like some seasons in baseball. Not that I'm a big baseball fan, where you fall in love with a guy who just crashes all these home runs really early, and pitchers are like, okay, he can hit the fastball. Can he hit anything else? And he can't. And that's the end of his career. And that's what Pacquiao looks like. Pacquiao looks like a guy who knows how to hit one pitch, and anything else he's confused by and just doesn't have any answers. So Yeah, I mean, by the seventh round, I have it even at that point.
Yeah, in the going into the eighth, yeah, I obviously scored round seven for Marquez too, and then in the eighth though, that's when I started kind of clashing with what the commentators were saying, or at
Mm.
least what some of them were saying. Because I thought that Marquez was doing fairly well. Pacquiao was aggressive, but he kept trying to measure for the left hand, and he just couldn't quite get it landing flush. He was glancing with a lot of it. Now, they did make a good point that it also doesn't even necessarily have to land to be effective because he's so strong and because of the way he throws it. However, he wasn't landing it very flush. And that being said, Lampley said at one point in the round, like right after Marquez lands like two or three really good combinations, Lampley's like, this round's up for grabs. And I was like, is it? Is it? Okay. And Manny Stewart, like seconds later, he's like, no, I'm pretty sure Marquez is winning this round. And I'm like, yeah, you tell him, Manny. Come on, bring Lampley back to earth here. What is he talking about? You know, because there were some close rounds and close exchanges. I just didn't think that was one of them personally. But in any case, Marquez has obviously turned things around, or at the very least, enough so that the fight just looks like a different kind of fight.
Yeah, eighth round, Pacquiao is just getting more and more cautious, and none of his caution is going to win rounds.
Yeah, he's wary of
There's
getting countered at this point.
yeah, yeah. I got some crazy cat action going on behind me
They're not
here.
wary of getting countered.
No, they're not. Feral cat versus domestic cat. But no, Pacquiao's getting more cautious and measured and calculated. None of it's working to his benefit. um, he's trying to become more tactical, but this is not a war that he can win with Marquez. Marquez is the smarter guy. They keep referring to him sort of as a professor in this fight, but it's true. Pacquiao, that is not his way to win. His athleticism, not that he doesn't become a much smarter fighter. You're going to see that in the fourth round, the fourth fight, where I think Pacquiao has come up with a strategy with Roach that not perfectly, but is way more effective against Marquez, where Marquez really struggles to answer, even with his enhanced physique through all that preparation and nothing else. And of course, not performance enhancing drugs. But yeah,
Just
eighth
drink and
round.
piss. That's all, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So Marquez, I have him finally taking the lead by the eighth round. And ninth round, you're starting to see don't back up from the corner. Like the two corners are don't back up to Pacquiao and knock him out discussions in the other corner. Um, Pacquiao just cannot fight backing up. There's a Tyson analog here. Whenever Tyson was made to back up or even just stay where he was, he's losing fights. He didn't win any of those fights. And Pacquiao, for different reasons, is similar. He is just not. It doesn't work to any of his strengths to back up or to be a counter puncher. He is like Tyson, a counter puncher at times as a pressure counter puncher. And I think that's his best look. I think that's him at his absolute best, especially once he has a new tool with the hook to offer as well, and more of a body attack. Here it just really is the Hail Mary left hand over and over and over and over again. But I gave Pacquiao the ninth round. I thought he did enough. It was very, very close. But I thought he would just his added effort. He is making a real attempt to come back, even if he's not that effective. I gave him the round just for the initiative he took to try to turn the tide.
I gave
And
that to Marquez, but put an asterisk on it. And like, I was like,
really
it
close,
was pretty close.
really, really close. And 10th, Pacquiao begins to finally
Mm-hmm.
find his range,
Mm-hmm.
and his trading with Marquez late in the round. Pacquiao begins to get the better of those exchanges,
Yep.
and his aggression has come back. So I I thought Pacquiao at the end of that round, Marquez is asked by his corner, "Did he hurt you?" And that was telling, I thought, because even if his side is seeing that. So finally, Pacquiao is back up in the fight on my scorecard going into the 11th. And then, of course, it just goes right back. Pacquiao's left gets neutralized. Marquez makes a great push at the end once again to steal the round.
Yep.
And going into the 12th, I have it even. So, I mean, that's the nature of this fight. It's so weird.
Yeah. Gosh, how would I have had it going into I guess I would have had it 103 102. So nearly even going into the 12th. Very, very close. But then I gave the 12th to Marquez. I thought he, for the most part, controlled the round. Manny was trying to break through, but almost kind of like stopped once he realized his left wasn't getting through. So my final score wound up being 114, 111 Marquez, but I could have obviously with that round swinging the other way, 113, 112. And if you didn't like one of the rounds I scored for Marquez, you could see 113, 112 Pacquiao. I mean, it's a damn close fight.
Yeah, I mean, I see your point too. I have very close round is the first thing I've written about it. Both are trying to press. Both are trying to take the fight. I think both know it is up for grabs. I thought Pacquiao had a little bit more pressure, so he's taking more risks to try to take it. So I very, very slightly gave him the round, which gave him a 1 point edge overall in the fight. But again, there are three rounds in that fight that I would have no problem if you either scored them even or gave them to Marquez as well.
And just obviously the story, the overall story of the fight is that it was a pretty good no, it was a very good fight. No, I don't want to downplay and say it was all right. No, it was a very good fight. But the overall story, the main kind of story or sticking point was the fact that Marquez got up from 3 hard knockdowns. And I might add on the third knockdown, not to kind of like rub salt in anybody's wound, but Manny did give him a real nice forearm as he's down on the ropes after the knockdown, then could have gotten a little extra time for that.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe the extra time would have just gotten him knocked out. But regardless, in any case, he got up from those knockdowns and not only did well, but like won the majority. Even if you scored, it sounds like you still scored the majority of the rounds for Marquez, but that's a massive knockdown round.
Yeah.
That just tilts it, huge. So in any case, that's Juan Manuel Marquez, obviously a fucking monster.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have it by points and instead just do it by rounds, Marquez wins that fight easy for me. But that first round was just such a deficit given what Pacquiao was able to accomplish. But then you have to give what Marquez was able to accomplish for the remainder of the fight was absolutely incredible. I mean, just the same way that we're marveling about what Fury did getting up off the canvas against Wilder in that second and third fight. I mean, whatever he accomplished there, I think Marquez's is more impressive in many ways.
And against a better fighter too.
Yeah, way better fighter.
I mean, just saying.
So going in the second fight, we're talking 4 years later. They move up in weight to 130. They step into the ring at 141 and 145 pounds, respectively. Marquez has fought 7 fights since the first one. He went 6-1 with 2 knockouts. Pacquiao went 7-1. And this is the Pacquiao that, just this unprecedented run that we're kind of in the midst of. And I think the big question here was how much of an anomaly was this first fight for Pacquiao? Is he still going to have the same struggles? I think all the questions were there for most of us rather than with Marquez. I mean, in all of these fights, other than in the fourth one with Marquez having this added power from this new body, Marquez is Marquez. Like he's the commentators are talking about him as the greatest counterpuncher in the sport. I think that's a little, Mayweather's the best counterpuncher. I think there's other guys who are in contention for that role, but it is interesting going into this one that Pacquiao's body and development is apparent right off the bat. He's different than the first fight. He just does seem to have balance and a punch selection that he's growing as a fighter. He's advancing, he's learning, he's developing, and Pacquiao just seems to have a lot of solid control, bringing almost to the end of the first round. You're just kind of like, ooh, I don't know that Marquez is going to be able to deal with this new guy, because I think Pacquiao is going to become very confident after what he's added to this equation.
It's funny because I'll be brief, but an aspect to this rematch that a lot of people might forget is that they tried to have an immediate or at least much sooner rematch between Pacquiao and Marquez, but Nacho Beristain, who is Juan Manuel Marquez trainer and at the time his manager too, was negotiating on his behalf, and I guess didn't like the money that was being offered to Marquez's side, and they were like, nah, we're going to go defend the belt actually against Chris John in Indonesia. And I think it was something like $30,000 or $35,000 he got paid. And so he went and lost his belt to Chris John over in Indonesia for 30 grand. Not a good deal at all, bro. Regardless, in the meanwhile, Manny Pacquiao he lost to Eric Morales in the first fight, great fight, but then beat the ever-loving crap out of him in the subsequent fights, and then defeated Marco Antonio Barrera in the rematch in the meanwhile. And like you said, it was raising his profile significantly, also raising his muscles significantly, needless to say, but also developed as a fighter. And that's something that becomes apparent very quickly in this rematch. For instance, round one, right off the bat, Manny starts out jabbing.
Yeah.
Just that in and of itself was a change.
Yeah. And then going into the second, you're thinking, okay, this is the new flow of what this fight is going to be. The first one's going to be determinative. And it's not. It gets flipped very quickly. Pacquiao clearly has more weapons. His foundation is a lot better. He's harder for Marquez to time. And then all of a sudden, Marquez buckles Pac with a 3-punch combo to end the round. And you go, oh, it's going to be this
again. Here we go again.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
What the
I
fuck?
thought we had this figured. There's no logic to it.
Yep. And third round, Marquez keeps up the momentum with a big right hand. He lands after the first minute. Manny keeps clapping. I mean, again, we're back to this weird energy that Pacquiao brings.
And that's the worst thing for him, though, because it's like he's acknowledging that you just landed on him. And it's like, dude, don't do that. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. And Pacquiao is just dealing with Marquez having these sharp counters, and he just doesn't know how to deal with it. And then his athleticism, and then he takes chances. And again, that's what's so great about Pacquiao is when he gets confronted by this, part of what makes him so difficult to deal with, he has a tremendous chin, but he also never doubts himself, ever. He is always fighting to win, to his detriment at times. Like, he's reckless. That is just his nature. He is a gambler. He is willing to bet everything at any given moment, sort of thing. So Pacquiao begins to get the better of two exchanges with Marquez, lands and follows up, and then Pac drops him. And Pac almost drops Marquez again at the end of the round. The ropes keep him up. It should have been scored a knockdown because the ropes clearly, quite possibly, kept him up. I thought they did. And Marquez is hurt and goes to the wrong corner as a result of the punishment he's had. So again, you're like, now where is it going? Because Marquez, I mean, for all I was saying about Pacquiao's strength of character, his willpower and determination, Marquez is just as much. I mean, these 4 fights, as much as they're a battle of skill, are equally interesting as a battle of willpower between these two guys. I mean, Marquez took a fucking beating in the fourth fight as well. He never looked like it was like, oh, I don't know what to do here. It's like the mentality is to go out on the shield for both guys. And that energy is part of what makes this combination so electric in all 4 fights too. But I mean, here we go again. Third round, 10-8 round for Pacquiao. He's up by 2. And in the fourth, Marquez comes back and he's suddenly disciplined. And, is risking getting beat in order to try to win this fight. He doesn't have the speed, but he does have the timing, which he's desperately trying to zero in on in order to overcome the detriments he has in athleticism. And then there's a firefight after 2 minutes. So the fight goes just in a completely different haywire direction than what we've seen or what we could have anticipated. And it's very, very close.
Yeah. For whatever reason, I made a note too. Like, I don't know why this is, but I keep noting, like, when the HBO commentators are talking nonsense, but that was one round where they were, for whatever reason, they kept mentioning Manny Pacquiao's athleticism. And in the meanwhile, Marquez was like lighting him up and shit like that. And they're like, he's so athletic. And I'm like, what, bro? He's hitting him. What the fuck? But regardless, like I said before, for whatever reason, Manny Pacquiao kept like acknowledging that Marquez was landing punches. And I'm like,
yeah,
dude, you're making it easy for me here. I gave the round 4 for Marquez, but close. But a lot of it was on the strength of that final minute where he was lighting him up, and Manny Pacquiao was kind of like, okay, hitting his gloves together, like, oh, you're hitting me, and I'm like, dude, damn, all right. But regardless, point was we're going back and forth here, dude. The
Yep.
way that they're battling it out, and like you said, it's a battle of will, it's a battle of skill, athleticism on all of these levels. Except for you can see that when the fight settles down, that's kind of like the overarching theme here is that when the fight settles down, when the pace slows down, it almost across the board favors Marquez. And that's the pace he
Yep.
wants. He wants time to think. He wants to be able to time Manny Pacquiao and kind of tame him a little bit. As they say, the old adage, skill beats power and blah, 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 but, speed and all that stuff. But timing can beat speed. And that's kind of what we're looking at here is Marquez timing beating Pacquiao's speed for a lot of these rounds.
And this is why counterpunchers, I mean, people in boxing appreciate them, people outside boxing, not so much. Because Rico is widely thought of as the most boring fighter in the world, but look what he could do to fighters that were renowned as offensive juggernauts. Shut them off. And Floyd could do the same thing, just shut them off. Their punch output. They're aware if they punch, they get conditioned that they're going to get hurt every time they throw something. And Marquez is the same. And this is a very, very difficult role to occupy effectively, is to be willing to take the chance of somebody advancing or even lure them in, as Floyd has his guard in a
That's why you
way
see
where,
so many fighters get hemped trying to do it because
absolutely.
it looks easy and it's incredibly difficult.
Yeah, I mean, Nonito Donaire and Rigo going into that, think about where Donaire was in the boxing landscape. ESPN Fighter of the Year, scintillating knockouts. One round with Rigo, he went, I don't know what to do against this, and I know I'm going to get
Undressed.
knocked out. Yeah, I just don't know what to do. I thought he's supposed to be the amateur and have no idea what to do with me. And it's interesting to see with Marquez, because there's a part of me that gets annoyed because it's Pacquiao who has to take the risks in this. Marquez knows if he fought aggressively, he's going to lose to Pacquiao every round. He's not going to get the better of the exchanges fighting that style. And there's no reason he should necessarily, but it's also one of the reasons why Marquez was not more beloved by Mexican fans when they had other Mexican fighters fighting the conventional, stereotypical Mexican style, balls to the wall, risk and everything. Marquez, you go, well, I appreciate it, but is it really something that I'm going to stay up to watch? Yeah, I mean, I have sixth round. Pacquiao's getting just thoroughly outboxed by Marquez. Sharp shots, and let's see, seventh round. Let's see. Marquez is fighting with a lot of resistance to the energy that Pacquiao's trying to muster, but he is just more intelligent, turning it, like as you say, when the pace gets slowed down and this becomes a chess match, Pacquiao just is not able to figure out what to do. And I guess by the end of the seventh round, I thought Pacquiao was able to take more risks in order to get the intensity amped up with the flow of action. And as soon as he does that, as we're saying, Marquez, everything favors him as it slows down. As soon as it speeds up, Pacquiao seems to be getting the better of the exchanges. So I gave Pacquiao that round. I now have him going into the eighth up 2 rounds. But again, I think there's a lot of close rounds here as well.
I think we've scored it the same, except for that last round, which I gave to Marquez, but said it was close because I noted that Pacquiao was breaking through with a number of his left hands, but Marquez was doing a good job fighting him off. But it's just that in kind of like how you were just mentioning, in those moments when Pacquiao was breaking through and the pace started picking up, that was obviously better for him. And Marquez was doing a lot better than you would expect him to, but he was still getting hit with punches, and it wasn't the kind of fight that he should have been fighting. And so yeah, I think that if you gave that to Pacquiao, I totally understand that. But here we go in the round 8, and basically I noted that Manny Pacquiao was trying all round long to make something happen, but he was walking into shots.
Yeah, I mean, 24 seconds in, he feints a hook, lands a deadly right hand, and Pacquiao is hurt. And Marquez is beginning to dominate at this point with just stinging shots. And you're thinking, where the hell are we headed now? Like, there's just so many shifts in this that are not even shifts, there's sea changes from round to round, where just the complexion of the fight turns into something where you just, there's nothing building up leading you to think it's going to become that. And in the ninth, I mean, again, Pacquiao recovers, clips
Yeah,
Marquez, um, and the
get some
momentum.
nice momentum going. Yeah.
Yep, it's totally shifted again. Great exchange at the end of the round. Pacquiao, for me, took the round, and in the 10th, Pacquiao lands the shot that Marquez would knock him out with in the fourth fight. Just almost exactly times it. And with 16 seconds in, it's just a massive shot, and lands another left with 1 minute later, and then another 45 seconds later. Like, it suddenly looks like Pacquiao is going to take this fight, and Marquez has run out of answers.
Yep.
So I have Pacquiao now with a bit of a cushion going into the 11th of 3 rounds that I have him up.
Yeah, and I guess I think I have him narrowly at this point. Manny Pacquiao narrowly up. Um, might be even. Regardless, I'm with you on how it's been scored the last few rounds because Manny Pacquiao has clearly got the momentum. He's broken through with his left hand. Marquez is bleeding from his over his right eye. He's a little bit swollen. He's again looking like he's having trouble breathing with his mouth open. I think a lot of it is having to fight his way through, but also getting hit in the face and it's swelling up. Doesn't feel good. Round 11, again, Marquez is walking Pacquiao into his right hand. It's just not having the effect that he wants it to have in this fight. In the first fight, it was like Manny Pacquiao was like getting hit, bewildered, eyes rolling around. Whoa, you know. In this
Yeah.
fight, he's eating it. It's still obvious that he's eating it, but he's eating it and coming right back. And so Manny Pacquiao kind of started responding with his own offense. And Pacquiao actually started blocking a number of Marquez right hands later in the round. And I thought that it was a close round, but a round that Pacquiao took.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I just thought Marquez just had this tractor beam with his right hand suddenly between his right hand or Marquez had a tractor beam for Pacquiao's jaw with his right hand. It was just so dialed in. Um, and then there's a flurry at the end of the round, but I didn't think Pacquiao did enough. So I thought Marquez took that round. I thought Marquez controlled the 12th round. About 85% of it was his round.
Mm-hmm.
I also gave it to him. And then I had a note because it reminded me a little bit. I did cross country for a couple of years at the end of high school, and one of the things that used to drive me crazy about it was, as with boxing, you have to pretend like you're not in pain or tired with people that you're competing against. You have to make them think the pace you're running is comfortable for you, trying to break them of whatever pace is too uncomfortable for them. And what some of the really smart runners would do is they'd run behind you and draft. They just wait the entire race to let you have that added 15, 20% of resistance running into the wind, and they'd be right behind you and just maintain that until the last 100 meters and blast past you, and you have nothing left because you've been doing more work. Marquez is that guy. His discipline is, I'll follow you all the way, and I just have a little more intelligence to not have to be flashy in order to take the fight. And that is the kind of tug of war between these two guys for me, is sort of Pacquiao wants to go out front. I'm going to lead the dance and I'm going to find a way to beat you. And Marquez is the guy who's going to find a way to not be as flashy, not be as entertaining, but the smarter style that ultimately is the better
Yeah, like
style.
more of a workhorse kind of style. Yeah.
Yeah, and discipline. You know, Pacquiao becomes a much more disciplined fighter, and a much more sophisticated fighter, but it's nothing compared to what Marquez is, because Marquez doesn't have his athleticism. He doesn't have his reflexes, doesn't have his speed.
Yet.
He had to overcome those things and be honest with himself about what he was lacking. in order to find a style where he could outthink all of his opponents. And I mean, there's a reason why Marquez was never knocked out as a professional. You know, he had the willpower and the intelligence to make adjustments if he got into massive trouble. Most guys can't do that because this is fucking life or death when you have to make these adjustments. It's not easy. So yeah, this second fight was a real tough one for him. I have it, you know, within a round or two. I gave it to Pacquiao, but I wouldn't have a problem if it was another draw, or even if Marquez took it by a round. I mean, ultimately,
Yeah.
you gave it. What was your score in the end?
114, 113 Marquez. So I mean, like
Yeah, we're
and
right there.
and and I think I had two rounds with asterisks on them both ways. So it
Yeah,
was like, you know what I mean? Like it could really go either way by of a point or two or whatever. And I mean, the overarching theme, they're jigsaw puzzling, dude. They I don't know what to say. They fit together. It's like Marquez is winning the majority of the rounds, but the rounds that Manny Pacquiao is winning are far more emphatic, far more damaging at this point. And it's like, if you were to score in a different set of rules, like I brought this up before, Pride FC, Japanese MMA organization, they do rounds, but they score the entire fight and they score the damage and the will to finish the fight and stuff like that. That's Manny Pacquiao. So anyway, but this is boxing. You score round by round.
yep.
Makes it very close. Very, very, very close. So uh first fight 2004, second fight 2008. Here we are, fast forward 2011. I mean, a lot has happened. But I think that what you were talking about earlier about Manny Pacquiao's development as a fighter, he's continuing to develop. Juan Manuel Marquez, for the most part, is still Juan Manuel Marquez. It's just that the weight has been changing, and we've had a couple years now of Manny Pacquiao's failed negotiations with Floyd Mayweather, and so that's kind of the undercurrent here, is that like, what does this mean toward a Floyd Mayweather fight for the third fight?
Yeah, and the failed negotiations have a big part of that is Pacquiao's resume, and not just what it is on paper, but what it was to watch. You have, since the last fight, the De La Hoya annihilation, the Hatton destruction, Miguel Cotto, Margarito, Mosley. This is one of the Pacquiao is willing to fight anybody, and when he fights them, he makes whatever Floyd did to those
And
guys look very, very insignificant. And
yeah,
Floyd is aware of that, and Floyd's only excuse for that is he's cheating.
they're playing this game at this time of one-upsmanship. So they're both fighting roughly the same fighters or a lot of the same fighters and seeing who can outdo who can outsell who can get an upper hand in negotiations. And Floyd Mayweather, like you said, is kind of falling back on, well, he's on fucking PEDs, which he probably was, but nonetheless, he's using it as an excuse during negotiations.
Yeah, he's saying you cannot move up and look like he's looking. You cannot be having those kind of results, not just winning, but blowing
Yeah,
out
crushing
guys
motherfuckers.
like that. I mean, Floyd barely beat Oscar. That was a really close fight. Floyd did great against Hatton, but he's just not doing what Pacquiao is doing. The demolishing of these Hall of Fame fighters that Pacquiao is just running through. It's one of the great runs in the history of the sport. I mean, he is auditioning to be one of the all-time great fighters during this period of time before he fights Marquez in the third fight, because you shouldn't be able to do this. Like, it was unprecedented in terms of the way he moved up from a guy who had to put some rocks in his pocket in order to qualify to be able to fight professionally because he was so small at the outset as a teenager, 15-year-old or something, to this guy now as a welterweight where you're just going, nobody should be that powerful, like that powerful, that fast, and how do you carry your power and get stronger, get more powerful as you're going bigger? It's totally unprecedented, and I agree with you.
Complete mystery.
Yeah, it's a complete mystery. No, I think he was absolutely doping, and I mean, we know many people were at this time, right?
That's that That's where it's at, and that's the people. That's, and not to just say that ends the discussion, but it's kind of like, there are a lot of people throwing stones in glass houses, is all I'm going to say when it comes to this
Yeah.
PED discussion, especially at this time before awareness had really been raised about testing in boxing.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at how Floyd was picking opponents and the scheduling in terms of when drug testing would have to happen, if you know when it's going to happen and your other guy doesn't, that is very
Yeah,
useful
then
if
it's
you
not
happen to
random.
be, it's not random. So, no, I mean, I think basically, I mean, Lance Armstrong told me, I asked him once when I was ghostwriting for him, if you didn't cheat, if you did not take drugs, could you have even qualified for the Tour de France? And he said, no, of course not. That is the difference. That
Anybody with
is,
the money to beat the testing is. That's it. Anybody who has the money to beat the testing is.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I mean, that's where we are. We're on the exact same page with this. I mean, Mike Tyson having hair loss from stress when he's 21 years old. Okay, that is one of
Yeah, all
the
of these like
absolute telltale signs.
36-year-old fools coming in with like mad acne and they haven't had since they were 16. Like, come on, dude, get the fuck out of
Yeah,
here.
just I mean, my litmus test is you can improve your body as an adult, but you can't hit puberty again at 35. You can't
Yeah,
have
if
a
all of a
new
sudden you're
body.
peaking again in your late 30s,
Yeah. Well, just like look at rapping when LL Cool J has this body that, he figured out how to eat properly and put
it's a
out a
lot of
diet.
anti-aging clinics.
Yeah, there's a lot of anti-aging clinics. And when one guy starts to look like that and suddenly they all do, oh, so genetics don't play any role in this? It's just, getting in shape.
We've beaten
Okay.
nature.
Yeah. So yeah, enough of that shit. But yeah, anybody who wants to shit all over Marquez for his body transformation in the fourth fight, which pisses me off still, you have to also
He's kind of
recognize the
leveling the
fact that,
playing field in a
yeah,
way. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So third fight, they are now Pacquiao's 32, Marquez is 38. In terms of the pay disparity, Pacquiao is guaranteed 22 million for this fight. Marquez 5 million.
Yikes. I mean, whatever. I'm not going to get into a fucking rant about that, but nonetheless, yeah, it's kind of, damn.
Yeah,
But it also, I think, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think that
yeah,
also goes to show you where I think people's minds were. Because, dude, I think this was the fight where Marquez was a big underdog.
yeah. And I mean, this was probably my least favorite of the four fights. I mean, so I can kind of go through it a little bit quicker because obviously the fourth one is just so dramatic. But they come out again. Both are really tentative.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very
Mm-hmm.
close round. Pacquiao lands a couple of lefts to take it for me. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but you're
Same.
just going, could this be special? I don't know.
Yeah, I thought it was
But
close, but Pacquiao took it, but it was slower. Yeah, for sure.
much slower. Second round, neither are scoring much. It seems they're both feeling each other out. So the big takeaway is the hope for Pacquiao fans is that new guy who's just gone on this run is going to be able to finally put Marquez behind him.
Yep.
And clearly he's not. These guys have a dynamic that Pacquiao is not able to transcend, even though he's clearly been doing it with all of these other people where it seemed as if he was climbing a much bigger mountain. Whatever it is about Marquez is just going to give him trouble forever. In the same way that Ali had these guys. Ken Norton was not a good match for him. Frazier was not a good match for him, which is weird when you see what Jerry Cooney could do to Norton or what Foreman could do to Frazier. But that's this thing about styles here. So I have it even after the second round. Third round, it still feels like a war of nerves. Marquez is just really conservative, and his offense is really only being implemented to create counter opportunities. He's not willing to take chances. For whatever reason, this is the quietest stretch of the entire trilogy when Pacquiao ends the round. So you're just thinking, oh God, like where is this going? And then Pacquiao ends the round with a hook,
Mm-hmm.
which is the best shot of the fight. It stirs Marquez, but I mean, I have Pacquiao up by one round, but it's suddenly looking like, oh, this is not going to be all that fun to watch.
Yep. And then they trade rounds. I noted that in round four, right toward the end of the round, they're still kind of doing a lot of jockeying for position and jabbing. And then at the end of the round, Marquez winds up catching Pacquiao kind of off balance and turning him around, similar to how he did in the first fight, which was probably his best work thus far. But, there's a lot of just going back and forth, trying to figure out who's going to kind of strike first type of stuff. And I mean, overall, the pace favors Marquez, but he's not really pulling out ahead like he had in those moments in the first two fights, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, for the next real 3 rounds, what I have noted is that there's just no spark between either of these guys to set a fire. And Pacquiao is doing something a little different in that, again, he's sort of like a pitcher who, instead of just throwing as hard as he can all the time or goes as fast as he can, he's changing the speeds up, which is disrupting the rhythm that Marquez is trying to time him. And it's effective, but it's certainly not dominating anything.
Yeah,
These
it's
are
not doing a lot of damage.
no, they're quiet rounds. And I mean, even going into the seventh, um, Marquez lands this really beautiful roundhouse right 50 seconds in. There's another nice hook mid-round. He's avoiding making mistakes. He's being careful and disciplined. And Pacquiao has this move in the seventh, which is interesting because you see it a lot in promotional videos of Pacquiao going into fights where he does a kind of dance. It's like Barry Sanders with a sidestep. He comes forward and creates a completely new sharp angle to land a punch. He never did it in up until this point with Marquez. And it's weird because I've seen him spar or train probably, I don't know, 10 times or something in real life. He does it all the time. This little skipping motion where he juggles forward and he could either go to his right or go to his left. And he does it here. And you just think, God, why wasn't he implementing this move more against Marquez? Because Marquez just bought it. And because he bought into it, he was wide open for a counter. But I gave Marquez the seventh round. It's now a really close fight. I have it within a round, and the eighth is completely even. I thought Pacquiao stole it at the end of the round with a really nice shot, but both these guys, there's just so little separation with what they're doing going into the ninth for me. Like it's a toss up.
Yeah, I think I have it through 8 rounds. I want to say I have it 6-2 Marquez, but with 2 rounds that I put kind of asterisks on that could have gone to Pacquiao. So you could have it, 4-4 easily. Point being, it's pretty close, but there's, like you said, not a lot of separation, not a lot of like emphatic round winning overall. And I think that overall Marquez is winning the cleaner shots. He's landing the cleaner shots, landing the better shots, but Manny's probably throwing a little bit more, which I think I noted that too. And then at the end of the ninth round, I also, the HBO commentators said pretty much the exact same thing, but they said it in a way that I didn't really understand what they were saying. Because they were like, yeah, Marquez is landing better. He's landing cleaner, but Manny's just throwing more. So we think we should get the rounds. And I was kind of like, that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me how you're explaining it, but okay. But they were close though. A number of these rounds are very close. It's just, yeah, I think that generally on my card, I'm favoring the slightly cleaner punching of Marquez.
Yeah, and I think that's a totally fair way to go. And I think I'm favoring more that Pacquiao seems to want it more and is willing to take more chances to risk losing. He wants to win, and Marquez is there to take what he can get from what Pacquiao is doing. So I always give the edge in that to Pacquiao, but that's a subjective thing. Like I don't disagree with what you're saying in terms of landing the better shots. I just think he's landing the better shots because of what Pacquiao is willing to risk to make this an interesting fight. And you should favor aggression. But that's just how I don't know. I feel biased about it because I would be that way if I was fighting. So I'd want to be favored for aggression as opposed to being poised to sort of pick somebody off the way Marquez is doing. But I also admire what Marquez is doing because it's just so technical. Like, I mean, it is just turning boxing into a chess game where there's blood involved if you make a mistake. So it's a form of chess where just the risks are so much greater. 10th round, it feels like mid-round, a fight finally breaks out between these guys. Pacquiao gets cut. And at the same time, I thought Marquez gave away the round at the end of the
Hmm.
round because Pacquiao's just coming on.
Yeah, he
So
rallied at the end. Yeah.
he did. And I just thought that Pacquiao has really poured it on to take very close rounds that Marquez could have won, but I didn't think he was willing to get caught. I still think he's a little bit haunted by, if I get reckless in any way, um, I don't know that I can knock Pacquiao out because I haven't been able to knock him down even so far, and I've rattled him with some big shots. And I know what's happened when I've gotten reckless almost every time I've been knocked down.
Yeah.
When I get hit cleanly by this guy and I don't see the punch, I go down. So I'm not going to take that chance. And so again, I give Pacquiao that credit narrowly in those rounds to put him up going into the 11th. I have him up by 4 rounds. Um, and I thought Pacquiao lands a really nice flurry after the first minute. Again, he's pouring it on. I think he wants to win more than Marquez. Um, Marquez lands midway, still really cautious, trying to preserve a lead that just isn't there. And I thought that was partly his corner to blame for that. I thought depending on your philosophy of how you want to fight, if you're wanting to fight another day, but in terms of this fight, I thought he should have at least acknowledged there was a possibility he was behind and taken more chances to try to win. We've seen many great fighters have to make that adjustment. Marquez wasn't willing to make that adjustment, whether it was pride in thinking, I have done enough to win and the judges should back my idea of how this fight has gone, or just denial about, which he should not be in denial because he's already had the previous 2 fights as a point of reference. So just too cautious for me. So I gave Pacquiao both of the last 2 rounds. So the last round being very close, but I think I gave it ultimately this fight 4 rounds for Pacquiao over Marquez, but also many of them really close. If you scored it a draw, I would not contest it.
I gave round 11 to Marquez. I thought he landed a few combinations in the last minute that Manny just kind of walked into. But round 12 I gave to Manny because I just didn't think that Marquez opened up as much as he should have. And that, I mean, it was a slow round, but that Pacquiao was pressing and Marquez didn't throw enough, basically. And I wound up scoring at 116, 112 for Marquez. But like I said, with 2 even rounds, with 2 rounds that could have gone the other way, that would be a draw.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think that my issue with Marquez's performance in this fight, watching it back, was that there were a number of rounds that he could have won, that he definitely could have taken emphatically or far more clearly. And one of the big issues was in the first 2 fights, he was opening up just enough to take these rounds. He fought too disciplined to fight in this third fight. He didn't open up nearly enough. He probably thought what he was doing was the right thing, that he was like, fight on a straight line and just kind of, keep it, don't open up, don't get into a fight with this guy. You have to fight him off every so often to let him know that he can't just come in. And that's kind of what wound up happening, I think, in this third fight, was that Marquez could have won on points, and if you gave it to him, cool, but that it's difficult to make the argument for him with the way that he fought.
And then we move ahead to their last fight, December 8th, 2012. They're now Pacquiao's 33, Marquez is 39. Angel Heredia has come into the mix, becomes the straw that stirs the drink in terms of Juan Ma's body being the big story of this fight more than anything. His body looks like a different body, not a better body that he had before. And you see it from the beginning that his punches have a kind of stiff added power that has not been there before. He's a precise puncher the way he punches in the first 3 fights, but something is different. It's sort of like Julian Jackson, just the way that his power is generated. It's different than the explosiveness of a Tyson or a lot of the big punch. George, you don't look at those punches and like Foreman and go, clearly that's like, you can see what makes him powerful. But there's something about the way that Marquez is landing stuff. It sounds different, for one thing, in the 4th fight. So in the first round, it's just really apparent that Pacquiao, this is the best version of Pacquiao that's shown up.
And the
He
most
is,
aggressive from the outset.
yeah, and as we were saying before about Tyson being a pressure counter puncher, Pacquiao's head movement has never been more dialed in, and his feints, he's setting Marquez up in ways that he was never able to do, or never even tried in the first three fights, and Marquez is having trouble with it. He's not sure where things are coming from, and Pacquiao is now in position after he's thrown a first series to really set up a second or third series of counters as he's pressing offensively. And that's new. And that's a very rarefied level of fighting. And especially when you combine it with Pacquiao's tremendous athleticism and speed and power. I mean, a lot of guys have talked about just it's how many punches are coming in that are sharp, stiff punches from Pacquiao, as opposed to just driving power, sort of like Wilder. So um, so I just thought Pacquiao here is just outworking Marquez, and his pressure is not this time removed from his recklessness.
He's
That's
kind
what
of
looks.
breaking him down. Like, in my
Yep.
opinion, that's kind of what it looked like, was that he's breaking Marquez down early.
Yeah. So I mean, I thought this was a really clear 10-9. I don't know who the hell would see this and give it to Marquez.
Mm-mm.
Um, and Marquez's strategy to me, when he sees, okay, this Pacquiao is the best one I've ever seen, I know I have some added power, is my counter punch is going to be, and there were videos that came out after he lands this knockout of the 21st century of him practicing that very shot. To me, Marquez's strategy was, I'm going to bet one number on the roulette wheel, which is
And
that
eventually
right.
it'll hit. Yeah.
Eventually it's going to hit because this guy is never going to stop pressing forward and giving me that opportunity. He's just going to like roll that roulette ball out,
And
and I'm going
hopefully
to
he doesn't
miss.
knock me out before then. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, he's going to break my nose. He's going to do all this stuff. I know what's going to happen because I can't do anything about that. And I've never even faced this version of it. But eventually, if he gets too confident, I have the perfect remedy to place all my money on that one number. And at first you just think, well, this strategy is a huge risk. It's the biggest risk of the entire
It looks like
series of
it's going to be a
fights.
bust at
It looks
first.
like it's going to be a complete, but just like anybody who would say my strategy is on number four, on black four on the table, I'm betting my house, my mortgage on that. You'd say that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But when it hits, we see what happens there. But the Pacquiao is landing in the second one. He lands a big straight left, and his speed and defensive responsibility, which is a new component as well to his arsenal, is just outdoing Marquez, and his patience and his attempts to counter. There are two more lefts that clip and back out Marquez,
Mm-hmm.
but you're just thinking, like, what can Marquez do against this guy? It's just not looking good, and 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 the other question that gets raised by the announcers, like last point on this, is the chin of Marquez better to be standing from punches that put him down in the first fight, or is Pacquiao's power less? And I'm not sure what the answer is, but that was the big question that seemed apparent from the second round, is something is different. And and I'm not sure. I mean, what did you think? Do you think Pacquiao lost some of his power? Do you think Marquez just his chin got better as he had the assistance of Angel Heredia to help develop his jaw?
Well, I think that it's a lot of it too is kind of like how Ricardo Mayorga used to say, like they would ask him like what happens when you're like sticking your chin out and tell him hit you and stuff like that, and he's like, it's a mind game. It's not it. My chin is not. It has nothing to do with my chin, which is not true. He had a good chin, but it's also that I can see the punches coming and I know they're coming, and if I know they're coming, I can brace for them and I'll be all right. And that's kind of how it looked like. It looked like Marquez was almost like Antonio Tarver against Roy Jones in the rematch. It's like he was saying, I know the punch is coming. I'm just going to absorb it and punch after it. I'm just going to absorb it and say, fuck it. Ah! And, as he's pulling out, I'm going to catch him eventually. And that's exactly what fucking happened. And I think that that's a lot of it. And also, what did Uncle Ben say in Spider-Man? With great power comes great immobility, because Marquez wasn't moving like fucking at all.
No.
He couldn't move like in the first three fights. That added power and added weight definitely kept him in place. So, like you said, I think that he had the right gamble. It just happened. It almost didn't happen in time. Finally, after two rounds, Pacquiao's kind of beating him up a little bit. And then out of nowhere in round three, the shock overhand right catches Pacquiao. And I mean, it's the most hurt we've probably ever seen Pacquiao, apart from his early knockouts in his career, obviously, where like, his eyes roll up in his head. He gets up and he's got this look on his face like, ooh, ooh, ooh. Like kind of got to like, shake himself out of it kind of thing when he gets up. And it's like, oh shit. I remember when that happened watching it live. I was like, oh, fuck, we got a fucking
Oh
fight
yeah.
here. Let's go. And, after that, it did turn into a fight. It kind of devolved into a brawl. There wasn't a ton of strategy. It really just kind of fell apart after that in a great way for us and a bad way for Marquez, at least ultimately in a good way. But in the meanwhile, man, it turned into a brawl and Marquez got his face just exploded. He was bleeding. He looked like shit, exhausted. This was going downhill for him very, very quickly after that knockdown.
Yeah, it reminds me a bit of George Foreman and Michael Moore, where at the end of that fight, Foreman's, oh, well, this is, of course, what I was trying to do the entire time was set him up for this shot. And you're like, no, you were losing the entire fight.
Yeah,
Like
you were
this,
trying to get your ass kicked for
yeah,
several rounds. No, you weren't. Come on.
yeah, this is a terrible strategy.
If
Yeah,
you
and I
could have
mean,
ended this in a minute and a half, you would have.
yeah, come on. And Marquez's right hand, the one he lands, it looks like a discus thrower at the Olympics. Like it's so wide and not particularly fast, but he set it up brilliantly.
Yeah,
He
it's like he like reaches out for it. He doesn't, like
It's
go
weird.
straight.
It's a really weird shot, but he did set it up very effectively to get Pacquiao to bite on something so he didn't see it coming. And I mean, there's two punches that Pacquiao does not see coming in this fight. The first one did that, and the second one did what's coming up in the sixth round. But yeah, you have this great flurry at the end. You're right. It just devolves into a total brawl. And in the fourth, I thought the interesting question that's raised at that point is what's the psychological impact of that KO for both fighters? Not the KO, rather, the knockdown of the previous round. Is Pacquiao going to change his style and adjust, knowing, oh, this guy can hurt me now? This guy has enough strength that if I don't see something coming, what can happen? And will this give Marquez more confidence as he's being way more outboxed than he's ever been against Pacquiao? To trust that his power can save the day, that he can actually get out of this thing and put the lights out of Pacquiao. So the fourth becomes a close round. Pacquiao lands a late round flurry, which was enough to hold off what I thought Marquez was effectively doing to try to steal the round. I thought Pacquiao just did just a little bit more. That very, very close round for Pac. And in the fifth, Pacquiao is just sharp with his left. The speed just looks so fast, and he's setting up the speed with just crisp shots, and he drops Marquez where you just go, is this going to be another, are we finally going to get into a groove where it's going to flow from this? And then Marquez lands a huge right counter as Pac closes in recklessly, and they just start going toe to toe for the rest of the round. There's a brilliant left-right, a straight left, and a jab that Pacquiao lands to hurt Marquez, but it also doesn't knock him down. And you can see Marquez's chin is different. These are shots that were putting him on the ground, and just huge pressure at the end of the round. Pacquiao is wanting to put this away, and it looks like he's going to do it. It looks like Marquez has enough vulnerabilities. How much blood has he been drinking from probably having his nose broken? I don't remember if that was ever confirmed, if his nose was broken. Do you recall?
I mean, it sure looks broken and it's
It sure
bleeding like
does.
it's broken. But I mean, it was like that in three of their four fights, so I'm not really
Yeah,
sure.
it's true. It's true. So I have going into the sixth and final round, Pacquiao's up 3 rounds on my scorecard.
Same. Yeah, same score. Yeah, like I said, when we first started this episode, the fuse starts burning. That's really what happens. Like it's kind of like both fighters have to make a choice in their 30s. Are they all right? Is this going to be a long, drawn out brawl, are we just going to fucking end this now? And they chose the second. They both chose the second. They went
They
after
did.
the second option, and they both, what happened. You know, like they both were kind of like, all right, this is not going 12. We need to end this. Manny Pacquiao took a risk, and it almost paid off in that sixth round. It came very, very close. Marquez, if he's not doesn't have a broken nose, he's, like you said, drinking blood. He's not breathing well out of his nose at all. His mouth is wide open, which affects how you take punches, affects your jaw, et cetera, et cetera. Manny Pacquiao's closing in. He's a giant monster. Halloween's coming. Holy shit. And then right as it looks like Manny Pacquiao, and they're screaming, he's hurt. He's got Marquez hurt. He's closing in. Bam. I remember watching that live. My oldest daughter, who was like 1 or 2 at the time, is asleep in the other room, and I squealed, dude. But I tried to do it in a way that wouldn't wake her up. I was like, it's like, oh my God. And then that turned to, I think he killed him. Like
Yeah.
I literally for a moment thought, oh no. And thankfully, that was not the case. But yowza, yowza.
Yeah, I remember I was on a deadline to write about that fight, and I finished the whole thing, and my editor said, something's missing. You haven't given us that moment of the knockout. And I'll just it's just like one paragraph if you'll indulge me, but like it was like trying to fucking find that thing. After 8 frustrating years, 4 controversial fights, 42 contentiously scored rounds, with over 500 punches landed for more than 1,800 thrown, after 2 grueling hours of opportunity under the spotlight, on December 8th, 2012, Marquez finally landed the punch of a lifetime against Pacquiao. It happened with just 1 second left in the 6th round of their mythic saga. Pacquiao charged forward to land one final blow before the bell, and instead added his own momentum to Marquez's immaculately timed coup de grace right hand, which landed flush against Pacquiao's jaw. On TV, when the punch landed, Pacquiao's back was to the camera, and the reverberations of the impact were only detectable through the sudden jolt of Pacquiao's wet hair on the back of his head. I thought he'd slipped.
It looked really strange, and that's almost what it looked like he slipped and injured himself or something, because it was
Yeah.
like he was just still, and I was like, what?
Yeah, I mean, I went to this thing about Charlie Chaplin. It said a man on a banana peel from a distance is funny, and up close, it's horror. And there was something about Pacquiao where it's like his face looked like it was velcroed to the canvas. You were just kind of like, that man can't breathe. His breathing holes are covered, like it looked consumed in the canvas. And
There's
and
Mitt
just
Romney in the background,
yeah, and his
with
wife,
his like
yeah, and his wife,
outstretched hands.
yeah, you know,
Aram and Jinky a couple rows back, freaking out.
freaking no. I mean, we thought we'd seen the most famous man in the history of boxing killed. Like it looked like an assassination.
It appeared that way for a few minutes.
Yeah, and the first place that America saw a guy get beaten to death was in a boxing ring. That's the first human being that America ever watched get killed on live television. And it looked like you're actually going to see the death here, not just the beating that would lead to a coma that would ultimately lead to that death that happened a
Yeah,
few
so
days
that there's
later.
some separation,
Yeah,
so there's some veil.
yeah, exactly. There's no veil to this. This is not factory farming. This is bullfighting where you're going to watch the fucking thing get killed in front of you, like sacrificial situation. So I mean, and as we're saying, the momentum looked like it was going the other way. We were going to watch
Yeah,
Marquez
sharply.
suffer some kind of iconic knockout, and suddenly we've seen by far the definitive knockout of the 21st century, one of the most iconic knockouts in the history of the sport, and it was just shock for a while.
And then what happened moments after Manny Pacquiao came to and we realized he was okay? The memes flooded the internet and
Yep.
for like days and days and days. And even still now.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And it was so interesting, as you said, like what Pacquiao was getting so dangerously on target with his shots leading up to it. like in a way that it never happened in the previous 40 odd rounds. Suddenly it was like Marquez cannot get out of the way of this guy, and Pacquiao's willing to risk everything to just fucking put this guy away. They both had this feeling of, we need to get rid of the person in front of us. Like in bullfighting, a matador is always taunting the bull by getting in his space. Every animal has that space where when you encroach upon it, it's going to attack. It just can't deal mentally with the stress of something encroaching upon it. And there was something about both guys at the same moment were feeling that pressure and willing to just risk their lives to just get rid of this thing that was just causing so much stress on them. And ultimately, it looked like it was going to go one way, and it just spins into this. So it still is a knockout that stays with me as much or more than Buster Douglas putting away the invincible Tyson, or Tyson Fury with Wilder, which was amazing to watch as well. But nothing quite like this. Like this was
nuts.
Yeah, just not just as a symbol, but also if you had worked your way to it, it was even more just inexplicable. And I mean, like they say in magic, like the ultimate way to deliver a magic trick is it's perfectly logical and completely surprising at the same time. It seems inevitable, and yet it's inconceivable at the same time. This had that power of like the ultimate kind of magic trick of a result. And it's still weird to watch because you're going into it. I'm still thinking, oh, wow, Pacquiao's going to knock him out at the beginning of the round, even though I completely know the end result. It's just bizarre.
And even though we came here to talk about the fights themselves, just the extremely brief epilogue to this is that incredibly there was a fucking epilogue. I mean, are you kidding me? Manny Pacquiao's career should have been done 10 years, 11 years ago now, and it wasn't. It somehow was not. He still went on. And, you know, this wound up being, I think, an excuse for Floyd Mayweather to not fight him again for a couple of years. But nonetheless, he still went on and fought him. But, you know, huge knockout, huge end to their 4-fight series. And really, between Pacquiao and Marquez, 4 fights, 4 unforgettable fights. And wow, the quadrilogy goes down in history, dude. I mean, apart from the knockout, the first 3 fights really could have gone like either way, man.
Yeah, it's a magnificent kind of just example of what the sport can do when you find 2 guys that are just so perfectly matched. And yet it's so frustrating. It still feels frustrating to watch it. And I think both guys are made for each other. But I mean, it's its own version of Frazier Ali, you know,
Indeed,
where
yeah.
separate, nobody has the chemistry that these 2 guys have. And sometimes, you know, and I think that's true of Fury and Wilder. I don't see Wilder as an exceptional heavyweight, or like people comparing that to Ali Frazier. No, it's not. It's more like Foreman Lyle. These guys, Foreman Lyle is amazing to watch. You could show it to anybody who doesn't even like boxing, and it's so dramatic. But it doesn't mean that it's the most important fight. It just means like it's one of the most exciting. And these guys, it's important and exciting, and has so much to what the sport can offer. There's not a
And
lot.
high level too, yeah.
Yeah, at a high level. So yeah. So this was fun.
We appreciate everybody who listened in and paid attention. Thank you so much, Bren. Thanks for doing the homework. I appreciate you, man. Everybody who listened in via the podcast, thanks again. And go ahead and subscribe, whichever podcast app you subscribe through. We appreciate that. Give us a rating, comment, all those things. If you watched on YouTube, hello. And thank you so much. Subscribe there as well. Leave a comment. We'll try to answer back. As far as social media goes, at least for the time being, we are on Twitter. Go ahead and follow my boy Brin at Brinicio, Brinicio. Follow me at Boxing History. We're also on Facebook and Instagram, the Knuckles and Gloves podcast, that is. So see us there. Brin, we'll talk soon, bro. Thanks so much.
You got it. This was fun. Thanks, man.
Peace, everybody.